This is the Definitely Uncertain podcast. Each week, we look at how high net worth families can improve their lives, decisions and investments in a deeply uncertain world. We always aim to provide practical information, even if we can't offer specific investment advice.
Welcome to Definitely Uncertain, the Goldrock podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of resilience, and in particular, the importance of resilience for families of major wealth. Today we welcome Dr. Tamar Milo, who's going to talk about the importance of resilience for multi-generational families of wealth, and in particular, during the current period of uncertainty and COVID-19. Tamar is a pioneer in the family business consulting industry and is also the author of Success at Succession, a book that looks at how to deal with complex events in the family cycle, generational change, and changes caused by internal or external events. Tamar is also the founding partner of Dorot, which literally means generations. So she's perfectly qualified to talk with us today about the importance of resilience and why this matters. Welcome to the podcast, Tamar.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
So I thought maybe we'd start our conversation by actually trying to define what resilience actually means. So I looked it up. Resilience is the ability to deal with difficulty. It's the ability to bounce back even stronger, perhaps, through that adversity. The adversity itself can be a one-time crisis or maybe ongoing difficulty or uncertainty. In either situation, we need the ability to get through. We need the possibility to become stronger as a result. And today, Tamar, maybe we're going to chat a little bit about how that can be reflected in a family environment.
First of all, I would say that when I listen to your definition, I think about the story of the two frogs in the vat of cream. You know, two frogs fell into a vat of cream. One said, okay, what can I do? I fell in, I will drown. And she just plunged in and drowned. The other one said, I don't know how I'm going to get out of here, but I have to get out. So she started jumping and jump and jump and jump until all the cream became butter, and she climbed on the butter and got out. So basically, that's resilience. You don't know how to do it, but somehow you get out of the situation.
So that's a great way to start our conversation. Let's maybe consider the characteristic of resilience and think about why then, as you've described, it's a critical issue rather than maybe a nice to have, and how specifically in uncertain times, this can really be the difference between survival and not survival. We heard about the frogs. Maybe you can share with us some other sort of life examples of what that resilience looks like.
Yeah, you know, first of all, I think we have to be aware of the obvious, and that is that the path that led into success in the past 20 years or 30 years or 50 years is not necessarily the path that would lead to success in the next 50 years. Obviously, things change, and the ability to reinvent oneself in every generation and under every circumstances is critical. There is a beautiful book called The Hare with Amber Eyes, which tells the story of a family dynasty that was richer than the Rothschild when they started in the 18th century. And then a list of family leaders who were not capable of reinventing, of adjusting to the situation, and through wars and dilution and whatever crisis they went through, the family fortune disappeared. And the story is written in the 20th century when there is nothing left. You never know what will happen and what kind of crisis and how, but obviously you need the resilience, the ability to rise to the situation, to hold on to it, and to create something new out of the crisis.
So we can sort of assume that most families who achieve this type of success, at some stage they went through a crisis or a difficulty, a period of maybe business uncertainty, And the leader at the time, probably the first generation, the guy who founded the business, will have had to use that characteristic in order to get through. How do families take that and turn it into something which is passed through the generations? How does that get passed on?
That's a great question, because, sometimes I meet families where the younger generation remembers only years of success and of continuous growth and revenues and wealth. And I say to them, if you are not aware of the possibility of a crisis, and if you're not aware of the danger, you become complacent, and that's dangerous. So I think that family legacy, is one very important element to always strengthen and make present the family legacy that tells the story of how in one generation, it doesn't matter if it's the founders or afterwards, somebody overcame a big crisis by doing something, by assuming leadership, by being creative, by not folding down, whatever. And legacy is very, very important. I know of a family where they start every company event and every family event reading something from the founders' writings, either a letter or a diary or something. And at one point I thought that was very boring, we all know about it. But then I realized that was their way of maintaining the legacy alive and creating a legacy. And that's so important.
So a little bit like how peoples, indeed, nations, construct almost a ceremony of passing over that heritage. That's what families you're suggesting or recommending, and what you've seen is that families actually manage to keep that legacy of resilience alive by talking about the points at which it may have been difficult.
We have that in Judaism. In every generation, you have to feel as if you went through Exodus.
Absolutely.
What does it mean? It means that the legacy is alive. It's not just a chapter in the history book, it's alive.
What are the pitfalls that families can find themselves in where they have resilience, but that gets destroyed? I mean, we're assuming for a second that it just, if we talk about it, it can be passed on. But are there mistakes that people make that destroy the resilience?
Yeah. One very common mistake is to focus on one family member and to say he or she will be the next leader. But it's interesting that what we see, there is a research that had been done in the past few years about families who went through 3 generational transitions. They call it 100-year-old family. And those are families who managed to keep family harmony and a prosperous business. And the interesting thing is that all those families invest in education of the rising generation. And it's not about pinpointing and saying this individual, but rather to invest in human capital, because you never know who will be the one who will rise to a certain crisis. So that's one mistake. I think another mistake that many families experience is overparenting. It's this natural will to spare my children from the hardships I had, and to spare them from the hardships through the money I have. Mm-hmm. And that means not letting them stretch their muscles. And muscles have to be stretched and have to be practiced in order to be able to be useful when the time arrives. So I think that career planning is very important. Working outside the family business is very important. Being active in social responsibility projects, in politics, in whatever social environment that is different and non-protected, where you have to prove yourself for who you are and work hard to prove yourself. rather than being protected by the parents, because the parents, the parents' wish to protect their children is very natural. I cannot fight it, but I can say, get your children out of there. So you cannot protect them.
We're sort of coming to the end, so maybe I'll try and summarize the practical aspects of what we've talked about. We said that resilience is not a nice to have. Sometimes it can be the difference between survival and no survival for a family or a family concern to be working together. We've said that in order to do that, we have to cherish, we have to nurture the family legacy, which means talking about those difficulties, even if they're not within, and particularly if they're not within living memory. It's very important to have some level of career planning, which doesn't necessarily follow the same track for each person, but absolutely needs to take on the principles of being outside of the family setup, taking on responsibility either in a business or a social environment, and going through those processes which will prepare multiple members of the next generation for the whole new set of uncertainties and difficulties, which are by definition going to be different to the ones the previous generation came into. And I think, hopefully people will be able to take those away as practical solutions. I want to thank Dr. Tamar Milo for being with us today on the Definitely Uncertain podcast. If anybody has feedback or questions, then please send an email to podcast@goldrockcap.com. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.